Our next guest is probably just waving the banner about that. She's been pretty vocal during this time. She is a state representative for the 92nd Legislative District. She is Dawn Keefer, who joins us this morning. Good morning, Dawn. How are you?
Good morning, Gary. I'm doing well.
Are you excited about turning yellow today? I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek this morning.
As I can be, I'm at the point, just open up. I don't know what yellow means or what green's going to mean, although I hear he's going to open up with green, which sounds great. However, we couldn't get him to tell us what green even means, so.
Yeah, we didn't know what green meant a couple weeks ago, or maybe as soon as a week ago, when they asked about, well, what are the rules to get the green, and they said, we don't have those yet. So now apparently they're developing those. I was reading a piece this morning back from May 13th, Dawn, and the governor put this out, and the title of this was that Governor Wolf announces inclusion of gender identity, sexual orientation, or expression in COVID-19 data collection. And it says in there, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, just this one line, it is a top priority to ensure that all people in Pennsylvania who are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 have access to diagnostic testing to ensure a healthy Pennsylvania for all, especially during these unprecedented times. The Wolf administration will only partner with organizations and entities throughout our response to COVID-19 that have established commitment to non-discriminatory practices. This is a practice echoed in the governor's statement of non-discriminatory standards of care pronounced on March 30th. We hear this word inclusion a lot, and it hit me this morning. What about the inclusion of the citizens of Pennsylvania in helping to make up rules for themselves and keeping their liberty and freedom and their livelihood during this time? If we would have been maybe inclusive from the beginning on that, wouldn't we be a lot better off today? Your thoughts?
Exactly. How about being inclusive of a separate and equal branch of government, the House of Representatives, right? How about being inclusive, period? We learned yesterday he wasn't even inclusive with all of his administration. So it is Governor Wolf and Secretary Levine in their little bubble with however many, staffers they have coming up with these rules, making it up as they go. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you have time, and he has the resources to do this whole inclusion thing, right? In addition, we're going to track that data as well. But he can't even tell us the number of people who recovered. How are you going to do the other? When I read that, my head exploded.
I was looking at this and thinking about what would be the way in which we'd like government to do this. When we look at Article 1, Section 1 and 2 of the life, liberty, and property. And I'm thinking, did we protect life, liberty, and property in this? And if we looked at this through the filter of freedom and liberty, instead of curtailing liberty, what maybe should the government have done? And I just wanted to offer this to you for your consideration and to see what you'd have to say. How about, number one, talk with us as people? Number two, educate us as to what you know and be very transparent and open. Number three, ask our permission since we are the government. Give me your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And that's our job as government, right? We're just supposed to provide you with that information. You saw it as life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, but it's not. It doesn't say in there, and health and safety and everything else. Our job is to provide you with that information. And then you get to make the choice for yourself and your health and your well-being. But government's not supposed to come in there and dictate that for you. And if you don't feel safe going out, by all means, you get to stay home. That's what freedom is about. That's what liberty is about, right? This is just such an egregious attack on all of those principles that everybody should be up in arms.
I keep on going back to this Article 1. All men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent and indefeasible rights, meaning they can't be taken away even during times like this, among which are those of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property and reputation, and of pursuing their own happiness, as you mentioned. Have we been able to do that during this time? It's interesting that, from my standpoint, and maybe you agree or disagree, that we kind of trashed the Constitution right out of the gate instead of looking at that first and saying, now, how do we responsibly, as representatives of the government, the people, go about doing this in a way where we can make sure people know how serious this is, informing them, but also protecting their liberty and their property?
Right, and we didn't do that. And I get that we don't know what, we didn't know the risks of this or how serious it was or wasn't going to be. And I don't necessarily disagree with an initial, hey, let's all take a break. Let's hit pause, figure this out. But, a week maybe, right, to figure out, get all the information, the data, figure out what's safe, what's risky, and then allow those that, hey, if you can operate safely, that's what it should be, not what's essential and what's not essential. Can you operate safely? Can you operate with the least amount of risk? Go ahead and operate. You make those decisions. And I, as a consumer, can make the decision not to frequent your establishment. If I get one more call about a mask, right, it's not state law. You do not have to wear a mask, okay? For all your listeners out there, masks are not state law. They're a recommendation. That is it. Stop calling our offices about masks. If you don't like the people aren't wearing them, then don't go to that facility or that establishment. Right. That's your right to do that, but they're not state law.
Yeah, and where we have establishments say you have to wear a mask to come in here, and say, okay, fine. And then you have a choice of not going in there or going in there and wearing the mask and going by the rules that they set up. A lot has been said. The governor vetoed 3 of the bills that came from the state assembly this week. Talk about those vetoes that the governor laid down and what that meant to you.
So, I think the biggest one that you can see was purely politics. And I can't believe that the media is just not waving a flag on this. One of the bills that we had was inclusive, but it included real estate. So he vetoed the bill that would allow real estate transactions, and less than 2 hours later, he, via executive order, opened up real estate.
Right.
So that is purely politics. You're playing politics with this industry's livelihood, with their well-being.
Part of that hypocrisy to me was, and we had Kristen Phillips-Hill on the other day, and she said, we got told by Secretary Levine that if we did that in red areas and opened up real estate, people will die. And she said 4 hours later, you said 2 hours later, so somewhere just not too far after that, we come back and say, oh, yeah, we're going to open it up now with certain conditions. Apparently people aren't going to die 4 hours later. So, that's the kind of thing that we need to know more information about in explaining that and saying, all right, here's what we found out. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe we made a mistake. We're going to take a very quick break, Dawn. I want to get your reaction to that when we come back, and more as we talk about the state and what the governor could have done a little bit better here in terms of involving the state legislature, and also a little bit more about the Dawn Keefer, 92nd Legislative District Representative here on WSBA Morning. Now, what are you hearing, and what are some of the hearings about this past week?
So we're investigating as well, and we're going to continue on with the secretary, and she really did information, which was extremely frustrating. So I'm going to tell you what I want to know is, was there a plan? There was a plan. Was there communication with all of these long-term care facilities? And what we continuously are finding is no, they did not go in. That was not their initial plan of action. So we knew this is your most at-risk, vulnerable population, and we didn't start there. Right, so we know our numbers are staggering, and she wouldn't release that information. And I think, honestly, moving her mother from a care facility to a hotel is just icing on the cake, quite frankly, because what's really egregious here is you knew that this was our most vulnerable population, and you didn't put all boots on the ground to protect them. Yet you made sure to provide all the testing, all the PPE, all the resources needed for our prisoners. Oh, and you release some as well. So you prioritize that population, but not our seniors. It is absolutely criminal, in my opinion.
One of the things that I think has really bothered people during this time has been the lack of transparency as to the decision-making process. Forget the fact that they've not involved you, and we'll come back to that. But the idea that we don't know what these experts know. It's like, just trust us. Well, we're not in a real big trust mood right now for government. I don't know if anybody's noticed lately, but even before this pandemic started, trusting the government is not one of the things that a lot of people do. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who trust it implicitly and just say, oh, go ahead and do whatever you want to. But the lack of transparency in telling us about things and explaining it to us. Representatives are representatives of the people. They need to explain openly about what's going on. How would you grade the governor and the secretary in doing that so far?
He gets an F. He absolutely gets an F. He continues, like you said, they come up with these rules, they shoot by the hip, and they drop the rule, and he goes back into hiding under his bed and leaves us, the General Assembly members, there to try to explain it to all of the residents. We don't know. We don't know what the metrics are. We don't know what their guidelines are. They're not providing that data. And when we do ask for it, they thumb their nose at it. Even the subpoena that the Senate did, they ignored. They did not give them all the information, redacted half of it, manipulated it before they released it. It is such an affront to any transparency or accountability.
Final question, about a minute to go. I read in the rules for governing, the emergency rules for government, that after 90 days that the state House, with concurrent resolutions in the House and Senate, can override the emergency status. Is that happening? Am I wrong in my interpretation of that? What's happening there, Dawn?
It's not after 90 days. 90 days is when he would have to renew it if he would want to continue it. We actually could pull the resolution, the concurrent resolution, at any time to end this. Now, there's a lot of debate back and forth whether he could just reinstate a new one or whether he has to sign it or not sign it because it's a concurrent resolution. I'm not sure. I have been championing running this resolution weeks ago just because of how just unilateral in his bubble that he is, that we need some checks and balance. So that resolution made it out of our committee yesterday, and it will be coming up to the House floor for a vote this coming week. And
do we see anything coming out today from the State Assembly that's going to be noteworthy that you can mention to us?
No, there aren't any committees in today that I'm aware of. So there shouldn't be any further action. I don't know if there might be a committee hearing or two. I'm not familiar if there is. Okay. Dawn, I appreciate you taking the time this morning. Lots of good information, lots of good things to talk about, and we appreciate it, and we'll look forward to talking hopefully not next week, but the week after next. Thank you for all the hard work that you're doing there. We do appreciate it. Sounds good. Thanks, Gary. Thank you. Dawn Keefer here, State Legislator for the 92nd Legislative District.